I'd like to thank very much the organizers for giving me the opportunity to be here with you today and to share this interesting topic. So this is a little bit less traditional introduction. And as you probably know, there are conferences lasting several days and that are totally dedicated to risk-based monitoring. So to squeeze some parts and bits and pieces of interesting information into just 30 minutes, including your very valuable input, it's a mission impossible in a way, but I hope we'll manage all together. First, I have some questions for you, and I would like to ask any volunteer, please, what you perceive as the major differences between on-site monitoring, remote monitoring, centralized monitoring, risk-based monitoring. Is it more or less all the same, how they are linked together, where we are nowadays, where are our efforts, our particular enterprises and companies? Do you have any microphones, please, for the audience? Any try? There are no right and wrong answers. It's not a test. In the worst case, I will ask people whom I know by name. Don't push me to do this. So any attempt? That's exactly the moment I was scared of. That there will be this awkward silence. Okay. Let me try just to make it very clear in order to be sure we all understand the terminology and the differences. On-site monitoring, we all know exactly what it is about. The CRA goes to the site, books the visit, sits there, does the source data verification, performs all the other activities. Monitoring a site is not just source data verification, of course. And then goes back home, produces a report saying, I've observed this and this and this and that, and we need to make some corrective and preventive actions. Basically, that's that. Remote monitoring is still done by the CRA, by the monitor, but from the office, not at the site. And personally, I had always question marks about this, thinking, like, if site coordinator and sub-investigator tells me over the phone, yes, the new patient signed the correct version of the informed consent. I hope so. But how can I know? How can I be sure? So remote monitoring was in a way a transient part, transient stage, leading more forward to centralized monitoring, where we already apply some, of course, well, I don't want to say electronic data capture, that we really, what we do is site data entry. That's different. So we have the data part, data management, program checks, consistency, automated checks, in order to see, is there, to reduce the time for the monitor needed at the site, potentially reduce the amount of percentage for source data verification, and finally start thinking, can we take it a step further about risk evaluation, monitoring trends, seeing which sites are moving in a wrong direction, doing something before they get to the wrong spot. That's where we hope to be. And if we talk about data quality, why we say new paradigm? Well, traditionally, for many, many years, what we expected is if we do 100% source data verification, meaning we check every single entry in the case report form against the original record, we are fine and we get good quality data. Well, maybe, maybe not. It depends on many things, on the qualification of the CRA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I really cannot go deep into detail. But what we say here in risk-based monitoring, we say maximum 8% SDV is fine, which is a huge difference in terms of time needed, cost, how we manage the whole stuff. How come? Well, not all data is critical in the first place. So we need to define what is the critical data for our study outcome, for the evaluations, what we are looking for. And the impact of errors, it's also not the same. So if the critical data is impacted, we have a problem. But we may have non-critical data, we may have a percentage of acceptable errors, and we don't care about these. We can go for 100% quality, and I would like to know who's going to pay for that. No one. Simply no one, because already the studies are way too expensive. That's one of the main driving forces for employing risk-based monitoring, new approaches, technologies. We don't want to make it even more expensive. No, our purpose is just the opposite. And also the percentage of source data verification, the impact, depends on the size of the study. If I have a study with 10,000 patients, then the risk if one particular information is incorrect is irrelevant practically. In the quantity of data, this one item is insignificant. So the bigger the study is, the less important the high percentage of SDV becomes. Let's see the definition. FDA came first, August 2013, saying it's a mix of strategies that include centralized and on-site monitoring. Fine, quite simple. EMA comes a few months later in November 2013 with much more elaborated definition. I don't know why. But maybe we should ask some EMA representatives why it has to be so complicated. But basically, EMA says it's not just a mixture of centralized and on-site monitoring, it's a risk management implemented in a study. It's the approach that we want to utilize to minimize the risk, of course, to manage it and to control it. And both agencies agree, we all agree with no doubt, our target is to protect the clinical trial participants, the patients or healthy volunteers in some phase 1 studies, and we want to make sure that our data is credible, is reliable, can be accepted in other parts of the world, and we haven't wasted our money. The new ICH-GCP guideline, which is now under comment and evaluation stage, and is expected to be released sometime like mid-next year, says we should utilize quality management system in the studies. And this quality management system should be based on risk evaluations. What does it mean? Well, first we need to identify the critical data. Critical data for patient safety, for data integrity. Let me kill this part if I manage, because I don't like it here. Just give me a moment. I'm still struggling with this one, sorry. At last. So we need to define the risks, identify them, see what is the risk of the systems we are using, the study itself, meaning the therapeutic indication, the complexity of the design, etc., etc., etc. Would be a long talk to dig into detail. And of course the site level. That's not irrelevant, and each site is different, and you see that's the basics of risk-based monitoring. We evaluate the risk. What we need to see is if the risk materializes, becoming an issue, what is its impact? Is it major? Is it minor? Is it significant? Is it not significant? How able are we to detect the trend that changes the risk level, and how able we are to identify the risk itself and the moment that it goes over a predefined threshold? Of course, we need to control them. The best way is to avoid risk. Of course, then from project management, the second typical way would be to transfer it to third parties, which is a great idea. That's why we have vendors. And third, mitigation. The residual risk needs to be mitigated and controlled. We need to communicate them to all stakeholders. Everybody needs to be informed, review them. Is our prediction how the risk model is going to work. Is it still valid halfway through the study, or is it not? And finally, the agencies expect us to report in clinical study report what kind of quality management system we used, what are our criteria, how we describe the predefined quality, the acceptance limit, the deviations. It looks easy, quite simple, straightforward. It's not that simple if you start digging deep into that. The standards are still evolving. So first, it was Transcelerate Biopharma Incorporation, which is the organization of the biggest pharmaceutical and biotech companies nowadays. It's something between 24, 26 members. And the main objective is to improve efficiency and effectiveness of R&D in pharma. There are no CRO members in Transcelerate, but Transcelerate has published quite interesting and illuminating articles about approaches in clinical trials, standardizations, followed by FDA. It was a kind of positioning guideline, followed by EMA a few months later, and both of the agencies basically say, yes, it's an interesting idea, go for it, but they are not telling us do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 21, and you are fine. There is no exact cookbook how to implement it and how to approach the risk-based monitoring. Still evolving. There is no single company worldwide saying all our potentially fitting studies are running in a risk-based model. No. So we still are in the learning path, and we are gaining more experience. Finally, this is what I mentioned, we have the new ICH-GCP expected to be effective mid-next year. Where is it all coming from? From the space? No, not exactly, but typically what we've seen in the past. Regulatory authorities inspected studies, found some problems, found issues, issued more stricter guidelines saying you need to be careful about this and this and that. And all processes have been becoming more and more complex. Study complexity was increasing, which means also the cost is increasing. Finally, we ended up with something like average $2.5 billion to bring one single new medication to the market. That's average, meaning some companies are managing better and are below this $2.5 billion, but some of them are reaching over 11, including attrition rate, meaning all the molecules that die on the way. This is quite unsustainable, meaning 5-time increase over the 7-8 years means if we continue this way, nobody would be able to pay for new medications, for their development, for their marketing, for me as a patient, for healthcare systems. So the system like that is unsustainable. And we have now the environment that says we need a change. We have also the methods and the technical means, and we all agree we need to reduce the cost, we need to shorten the time. Still patent life is limited, 20, maximum 25 years. 15 years for development to bring a drug to the market is way too long, and the cost is, well, no need to comment on that. So what we see here is the need to reduce the cost, and the regulators agree, as one of the important stakeholders, saying, do something about it. They follow, the regulators, with issuing the guidelines, and we all agree, let's start doing quality by design studies. Not only quality by design medications, but also the studies. Let's modify and upgrade the methods to go better. So how would we characterize? In the traditional model, we have the event, patient site visit. Site enters the data. By the way, the difference between electronic data capture and site data entry is quite substantial. You may see through electronic data capture in some phase 1 units with high-tech equipment where even the blood pressure the values, when they are measured by the device, they are transferred directly, immediately to the database. Nobody is typing any values into any kind of interface like website for electronic case report form. It's very nice, it's very impressive, it's very expensive, and hopefully one day it will be more and more affordable to utilize it in a wide scale. It's again the matter of scaling. The more we use it, the cheaper it might get, but the initial part, the investment, is painful. The monitor goes, performs source data verification, monitors the site, and finally, we are querying the data, clean the database, and what we see traditionally, all sites are visited in the same, more or less, fixed frequency with the same fixed percentage of source data verification. Typically 100%, although FDA said in the guideline in 2013, we'd never ask for that. That was your interpretation. We want you to keep the participants safe, and we want you to present good quality data. How you do it, it's your problem. Typically, what we see, we are tracking, correcting, and trying to prevent issues, meaning problems that have already happened. While in the RBM model, we have the same event, we have the same, most of the time, site data entry, but now we have the centralized and remote monitoring, the risk management, evaluating the trend. Is the data coming on time? Are there many discrepancies? Are there critical data which are queried more than non-critical? So there is a long, long list what needs to be included. Initial risks, ongoing real-time risks. It's beyond my capacity to talk about it right here with a limited time. And finally, what we see is trigger point saying we need to go to send a monitor to this particular site, because this particular site is moving in a wrong direction, and we see it even before the problem happens. SDV is flexible, visit frequency is flexible, and we want to prevent the risks to happen. So we see more or less retroactive and proactive approach in these two models. Again, just a very brief, from a different point of view. When the monitor produces the report, we have 100% source data verification done, data quality assumed verified, and we have our nice visit report. Resource consumption, it's enormous. Think about big studies. I hope you can see that. Issues are discovered only when the monitor goes to the site, which might be 2 months later, after the problem has already happened. Inquiries are generated for issues and discrepancies way in the past, meaning the accuracy of the answers might be also questionable. If I'm a busy physician, investigator in a study, I should now rely on my memory unless I have extremely detailed source documents. Think how it was, what it happened those 2 months ago with this patient, and in the meantime I've seen 250 others. How reliable is that? In the RBM model, that's the nice part, we have the sites, and you see here in different colors. Of course, the green, like the traffic lights, means we are happy about the site. Our risk management, our risk dashboard says these sites have no issues. They are not going outside or moving outside the predefined risk level. That's, of course, very important to predefine it in a very good way. We have now our amber sites that are still fine, but could be better, and we want them to be better. So my green site, I would ask the monitor, go once half a year, check 20% of data, 10% of data. And again, I need to define what sort of data. In the amber site, I say, go every 2.5 months, check 75%, check 50%. These are the data we need to focus on in order to improve the site. It might trigger extra training for the site, can be remote, all kinds of visualized stream websites. And finally, we have our red side, and there is where we need to put the focus on. Something is moving in a very wrong direction. So here I will send a CRA immediately. Okay? Go there, check what's going on. Something is wrong, and it's the matter and job of the data analyst saying what is expected to be wrong, to communicate clearly with the CRA. And our target is, of course, to have all sides green. The predictive modeling, that's typically the black box, at least from the monitor's point of view. There is a complex algorithm. By the way, it's not something new or developed for pharma or CROs. It's been here for ages, used in finance to monitor stock market changes, and now it's adapted and adopted for clinical research and drug development. It's very interesting, and I believe there might be some other useful technologies out in the world there that we can utilize and perhaps change the way we are working for better. And what the data manager sees, something like this. Risk dashboards, all kinds of graphs, which means also to evaluate where we are today. We have a mixture. We all know that. We can even see studies with the old-fashioned paper case report forms. Very few, but they are still there. We may have, of course, majority of the studies would have the so-called electronic data capture, meaning electronic case report forms for site data entry. And we more and more go into the risk-based monitoring, predictions, forecasting, trend evaluations. So all these we can experience nowadays. So it's a complex transition stage. What is limiting us to move forward faster? Well, we have some implications. Business implications in the first case, such as investment in technology and ability to compete. I guess a question for you. Simple study, 250 patients, 5 countries, let's say 15 sites. 20 people need to access the risk-based platform, the dashboards. How much do you think a company like Bioclinica would charge for the product? The study is for 1.5 years. Any guess? Okay, it's something for this very simple study, 100,000 euro. The bigger the study is, of course, the more expensive it is. So one thing is, if I have a small biotech company as a client, and for them the study total cost would be something between 500,000 and 1 million, because it's very small study and they need to save money, they don't have things out in the market that would bring revenues. 100,000 is a lot. And may I be able to prove the saving? May I be able to guarantee the saving, even more important? Because the company would say, okay, then let's go for it, but you say we may save something like 15 to 30%. It's cost effective, but can we really manage that? If we don't go for risk-based monitoring, if we stay where we are in our mixed models, we are losing inevitably competitiveness over a period of time. For electronic case report forms, it took something like 7-10 years to be implemented in a large scale. The transition from the paper to electronic took some time. It's expected and forecasted that the risk-based monitoring approach would be utilized in majority of fitting studies within something like 4 to 5 years. Time flies, it's not that long a time. So we need to think about our investment in technology. We need to think about how our HR departments need to address the change. We need people, our employees, with different profile, new resource structure. I may not need 30 monitors. I may need 8 as a company. And I need 15 data analysts. Where to find them? People who really understand the data analytics. Can we do some requalifications in-house? That would be the best thing to do. But it's always limited, and sometimes the more experienced here is they are opposing the changes, and that's not my idea. It's from Quintal's webcast the other day, saying what we've observed is the more experienced the monitor is, the less excited is about RBM and change the way he or she has been working for over years. It's human mentality. It's not that surprising, but we need to keep it in mind. And finally, of course, last but not least, and that adds to the cost, means we need to define new processes, write the standard operating procedures, define new trainings, and it's totally different. We cannot just somehow recycle what we have. It's a change. It's a revolution. It's not evolution. So we expect benefits, otherwise why to do it? Cost saving. This is again not my idea. This is the so far available statistics, 15 to 30%. 1/3 is nice. Think about 2.5 billion. Cut it down by 30%. Think about a company running 100 studies at a time. And let's say 80 of them are fitting to use RBM, calculate the savings. That's interesting. Investment in the pipeline. Why not? But it does not come by itself. The saving is not guaranteed coming as a gift on a silver plate. That depends how well we define the risk model, how well we define the baseline, how well the analysts are doing the job, what is the type of the study, scaling. We need to think about the effectiveness and efficacy, thinking, of course, yes, that's our aim to make things faster, better, more effective, more efficient. And again, there are some conditions about the thresholds, abilities, the quality of the model, its revalidation. And we are saying we are going to improve compliance in our studies even. And that's one of the appealing parts. You have better compliance. Well, some questions here to ask. Compliance with what exactly? What does it mean to be compliant? And how do we interpret our compliance targets? Let's put it for the time being, it's the minimum regulatory acceptable quality. What the regulatory authority accepts and says, we are happy about this, we should be happy as well. And I bet it's not 100%. We have also some limitations and constraints. One is geography. According to the latest surveys, American investigators are very happy to see the monitor once in half a year. Western European investigators are not that happy. Think about Middle East investigators. They would be utterly frustrated. It's a different culture. It's a different mentality. But think about, let's say, some Central Asia investigators with less experience, and they would take it as a normal. That's the way how to do it. It's the tabula rasa, the unwritten white table. It's still to be written with the experience. The study itself, its length. I need to evaluate trends. I cannot establish and change the frequency every week. That would be nonsense. So study typically lasting less than 1 year. Forget about risk-based monitoring, not yet until the models are perhaps slightly customized. And finally, our capacity to implement. Scaling, mentality, diverse positions we are in. So now again, it's time for your questions, and I hope there might be some, and finally a few questions of my own. If you have any experience, what is it? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it like we expected something better? Your time now. No questions, so it was either totally miserable or clear.
Are there any questions for Mrs. Kamila Novak about her very interesting presentation?
Yes, I think we have a question there in the back. Okay. We started developing the model in-house. So my experience started, I confess I haven't been involved in a study running on a risk-based approach. But we've done, with my colleagues, extensive search how to approach it and how to develop the model, how to develop the algorithm, how to change the processes and procedures, what kind of risk evaluation to implement, how to define the baseline. So that's what we spent about a year of our time. I mean, not totally dedicated, but it gave us some good ideas how to approach it. We believe it's feasible, and it's in line with Translate recommendations and white papers. So that's at least my experience. Yes.
Wait a minute, please.
Maybe more a comment rather than a question, and maybe you can make it a question. But you mentioned that we are in a learning curve at the moment, and you very well evidenced that there are categories of trials that are more fit for risk-based monitoring than others. Small trial in duration, for instance, is not going to be really efficient mechanisms and process. Don't you think that with time, and as we learn more about the risk models, and as the IT solutions will implement smarter algorithms and more standardized processes, because you also mentioned that the regulators, they are pushing for these new methods, but they're not giving you detailed way of implementation. Don't you think that out of this experience, and as this experience is going to be reflected in the IT solutions,
yes,
ready for use, then these current barriers will be overcome, and we will be in the position to generalize these approaches.
I totally agree, and I'm really looking forward to reach that stage.
I have a question concerning what you just mentioned in one of your last slides, concerning experienced CRAs and monitors. Yes, indeed, but you're right. I mean, someone who is working since 20 years and he's quite successful. In the meantime, he might even be to jump on a project manager's position or whatever. He's probably not the very happiest person to do risk-based monitoring. But on the other side, ask a sponsor what he expects for your monitor. If you tell him, hey, listen, I have a highly motivated young CRA, freshly from university, and he is really into risk-based monitoring because he is the one who has no idea about the old system, so he's the one who is really keen to learn it. I mean, I want to see that sponsor who accepts someone who is highly motivated, extremely well being educated in risk-based monitoring, but has not the slightest idea what he's really talking about. So there is indeed a conflict.
Yeah, that would be a very difficult diplomatic negotiation, at least. Perhaps maybe in the beginning to place two people, one who is experienced in monitoring and one who is more into RBM. It's also the curve for the sponsors. So how we sell the model, how we sell the less experienced person, it's different from one sponsor to another, for sure. Depends on the mutual trust, depends on our ability to demonstrate our capabilities to do it. And also depends probably on our say, mutual agreement, what we want to reach, and what guarantees our approach is giving, that we get out of it what we say we are going, meaning the saving, time, cost, more flexibility. We may get, of course, the answer no. That happens. we have now the first study running on RBM, and also the sponsor wants to have a very experienced person. It's case by case. I remember once when about almost 2 years ago, I was doing an internal company workshop for RBM for guys to have the idea what it is all about. And my personal expectation was by the end of the workshop, everybody would say, this is something new, this is interesting, there is an opportunity. And it was like, I'm going to lose my job. For me it was shocking, really. I mean, I've been in the business for 20 years and I'm excited about this. Probably you can see that, because I see it as a very interesting thing that can utilize different perspectives and different skills and create something new in getting out of the routine. But probably there is still a lot of work for us, meaning internally in the company and also in communicating with our sponsors.
I have a tricky question.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, as you said, the bigger the trial, the more chance it makes to implement risk-based monitoring, so that, let's say, savings would be bigger. What medium-sized CROs make chance of being involved in the implementation of risk-based monitoring, considering their size? Because, well, they won't be selected for, let's say, monitoring larger scale clinical trials. So is it worth investing in risk-based monitoring, even though you know that you will make very little chance of being involved in studies implementing risk-based monitoring?
Personally, I believe yes, it makes sense. We don't have to look for the most expensive solutions. You may have SaaS product, you may have Medidata, Bioclinica, dozens of others, because all of the IT companies are really happy about these trends, saying, we have new business there. But it makes sense and it can be cheaper. A lot of things can be done with less expensive solutions. It's more about approach, it's more about strategies, it's more about how we address the baseline, the potential structure, and then you may have a developer, you can do it in-house. We've been trying, and I truly believe it's possible, with some small parts, bits and pieces, perhaps outsourced for a particular part, but it's possible. I think we should go. We should go for it. That's my personal belief.
So, if there are no more questions, then we can go at the next presentation. We would like to thank Mrs. Kamila Novak for her very interesting presentation.